Hi, welcome back to Matt's Garage. Today we're going to talk about electrical, and I know that's everybody's favorite subject, but don't worry, I'm just going to teach a couple of tips and tricks and talk about what I've done on the Bronco to solve some of the electrical problems I had. On this side of the truck I had a bunch of random wires in this area, some red and blue ones connecting to nothing. I traced those back, those go to the neutral safety switch. I cut them off at the switch, and then these were just twisted together to bypass neutral safety. I kept it as it is, and then I grabbed the label maker and labeled it so I'd know what it was later. That means I can start the car in any gear, so I have to be careful, but that's okay. Scouts like that too. And then I won't have a reverse light. I'll fix that later when I rebuild the whole truck. Also, I'm not planning on running a AUX fuel tank, so I cut off the AUX fuel gauge wire. I kept the plug at the tank, and I labeled it with a label maker. It's a real handy way to keep track of anything you take off, or just if you identify something, you can mark it and then you know what it is for later. These three wires on the left side of the motor are in order: the ignition, the oil pressure gauge wire, and the engine temperature wire. They weren't connected, or they were all pretty torn up, so I spliced them in wherever they were fresh. Even though it doesn't look pretty, it is okay. I spliced a new wire and I ran them. I got a new oil pressure sensor down there, and then I ran the temperature gauge wire right there. So all that should work if the gauges are working inside the car. The other thing I was worried about was the alternator. The wiring behind here was all screwy, and then the ground wire had gotten hot and burned through its insulation all the way through. This was all loomed up before, and now I took all the electrical tape off of it, and you could see the ground wire had totally chewed through all the insulation. And the reason was it was grounding back to this, and this is a rusted out body bolt. And now I've got it wired to where it's supposed to be on the regulator, so it should work a lot better now. I've tested all that out. There's no resistance, so that should be a nice connection for the alternator, and I don't have to worry about it. Alright, so how you test the diodes in your alternator is you put your black connector from your multimeter on the red, on the hot, and you put your red connector from the multimeter onto the body of the alternator, and you should see a reading. I don't know if you can read that on my multimeter. It should be around 1200, and it was earlier when I was testing it. Now that it's on the car, it's giving me a slightly different reading, but you should get something. If you switch them, it just stays on one. But this is how you know your diodes are good. If they're reading in like the 30s or the hundreds, then you know you'd have a problem with your alternator. And of course, to test the battery while the car's, or test the alternator while the car's running, you go to 20 volts VDC, that's volts direct current. Obviously your black's in your ground and your red's on the voltage side, not on the amp side. And you put your black on your battery ground and your red on your battery pause. And see, I'm getting 12.77 because the car's off. That means the battery's healthy. But if the alternator was running, if the car was running, I'd want that in the 14 range. So that's how you test your alternator. Kind of basic, but some guys don't know. So I just thought I'd show you. So I spent a good portion of the afternoon basically on a hunt to try to figure out all the electrical problems for the car. When I looked through most of the factory harnesses, everything looked like it had been untouched and most of the wires were in good shape. So that was really a bonus. But obviously the headlights not being in was a big red light to me. You remember he had those ugly lights on that farm bumper and the relays and all that? And I was like, why didn't he just use the headlights? So I thought maybe there's something wrong with the headlight wiring. So what I did was I put the multimeter into continuity mode, all right? Continuity, resistance, I call it continuity, whatever it is. That mode with the fanny thingies. And I ran one wire to the positive on my battery, okay? Doesn't matter which because it's in continuity, but in this case, let's just keep it consistent. So red to the positive on my battery. Now my negative to the battery isn't hooked up. So I stick this negative cable into the headlight switch thing, the plug for the back of the headlight. I go into the car and I turn the headlight switch on. I should get 0 resistance at that point, okay? But I was getting like 30. It was really weird. And then I went in and I was like, maybe the dimmer switch is on, so I tried to hit the dimmer switch and it started bouncing to like 45. And then I released the parking brake because it's kind of blocking the dimmer switch, and then it jumped to nothing, or it dropped to nothing and then jumped up to like 1. So obviously something was wrong in the circuit. So then what I did was I took this off and I went and made the problem with multimeters is they only come with like a foot of cable. I mean, you have to be able to reach everything within a foot. So I took some of the wires I cut out of the car and I crimped on these little alligator clips that you can buy at the hardware store for one end, and then just any old connector for the other that you can stick into places for spade connectors. So I took off the headlight switch from behind the dash. I stuck this into the hot area and it was like the same reading, okay? So I pulled the headlight switch off and I'll show you how I tested that. So this is the old headlight switch. It's off. Pull, that's parking lights, that's headlight, right? So again, I'm in continuity mode. Doesn't matter which. I put the red on the battery and the black on the H. And you'll see there, I should be getting no resistance. And I'm getting resistance. So I'm going to jig a little bit. Again, I'm getting resistance. Now I'm getting 55, 54. That's not right, okay? So I went to, so that's junk. Let's get rid of that. I went to my buddies at good old Craig and O'Reilly's, or O'Reilly's, I guess. Chris, the manager there. Same position, right? I put this on battery, I put this on, look at that, no resistance. So that switch is healthy, okay? So that is problem number 1. Okay guys, sorry for the Blair Witch action here, but you know, it's late. So this is where that headlight switch plugs in. So I ran and I put that spade connector from that extension that I made into the H hole here, which is headlight. And I went and I tested my continuity and it was still giving me resistance. So what's after the headlight switch? The dimmer switch. That is the connector for the dimmer switch. It's down at the left foot of the driver. So I unplugged the dimmer switch, that from the dimmer switch, and well, I don't want to spoil it, but basically the whole dimmer switch fell apart. But I pulled the chunks of the dimmer switch that fell apart out, and I ran my spade connector from here to that headlight plug, and I got 0 resistance. So that means from here back to the headlight, my wiring is great, and that means the dimmer switch is problem number 2. So no need to do a continuity test. This is, I didn't take this apart. This is literally how the dimmer switch came out of the truck. So that's junk. Went to O'Reilly's and bam, new dimmer switch, $6. $6, okay, for that dimmer switch. And okay, 20 for the headlight. So $26 is all it's going to take to fix this problem. I'm fairly confident. I hope I'm right, because then I'm about to talk some trash. So the previous owner ran those 2 crazy lights, drilled holes in that crazy bumper, put in relays, ran wiring through the harness, had a switch under the dash for those lights because he couldn't get the headlights working, okay? And all it took was a multimeter and $26 and some time. So it's really important to know a multimeter, guys. They can really save a lot of headaches in your wiring goblins. I'm going to go put the switches in and then we'll test the resistivity. That's why I call it the conductivity test, because I don't like saying resistivity on camera. Okay guys, this is totally unrehearsed, like the rest of the show. Continuity test, resistivity test. Here's my headlight plug. You know what would help is if I turn the headlights on. Headlights on. Oh, zero, baby. Zero resistivity. Yeah. I love it when things come together.